Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Top 5 DEI, the premier podcast for and about DEI professionals. I'm your host, Jason Lambert, aka Dr. J, and my goal is to interview every person in the world who manages, practices, teaches, researches, or publishes anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm so glad you tuned in, and if you are ready to learn about some insightful DEI practices from experts from all over the world, and about DEI experiences from people just like you, join me and let's dive right in. Hello, welcome everybody. Today's guest speaker presentation. I just want to say that today I'm so excited to have my guest on today, Dr. Myrtle Bell. Some of you who are taking my diversity in organizations course should be very familiar with her work because it is her textbook that we're using for this class. And as you know, this Top 5 DEI is a podcast that we started that is for and about DEI professionals. The model is that we're going to ask 5 questions, only 5 questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But at the end, we're going to have some fun and learn a little bit about our guests, where our guest gets to share their top 5 preference lists, whether it's food, music, etc. And we might have some questions too. So let me jump right in and introduce our special guest today. Dr. Myrtle Bell is the Thomas McMahon Professor in Business Ethics and Associate Dean for Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Business at the University of Texas at Arlington. She earned her PhD from the University of Texas, UTA, my alma mater too, and her MBA from Louisiana State University and A&M College, and her bachelor's from University of Notre Dame. She is a faculty affiliate of the Center for African American Studies and the Center for Women's and Gender Studies. And as an interdisciplinary scholar, her research focuses on diversity, social issues, and human resources. Her book, Diversity in Organizations, a comprehensive research-based book for teaching and learning about diversity, is in universities around the United States and in Canada, and right here at TWU. She has served as associate editor of Journal of Management Education, a section editor of Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Journal, and the associate editor of Academy of Management Learning and Education. Now, check this out. She has received numerous diversity-related honors and awards. I'm not even going to name all of them, but including the Diversity First Award from the Texas Diversity Council, PhD Project Management Doctoral Students Trailblazer Award. She was selected not once, but twice selected by SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, as one of 8 professors among 100 distinguished global thought leaders from business, education, and government. She has also won the Dallas Business Journal's Diversity Leaders Award from our very own local publication, the Dallas Business Journal. So I want you all to please help me welcome one of my greatest mentors, Dr. Myrtle Bell. Thank you, Myrtle, Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, like earlier, I was just telling one of my students how exciting this is for me because you played an instrumental role in where I am today. For those audience members who do not know, Dr. Bell was my dissertation chair. And honestly, she was really like one of the, maybe the first Black faculty I had as an instructor. I may have had one in like undergrad, possibly. But she was the only one I took at UT Arlington. I'm thankful I can have this platform, this opportunity to thank you in front of an audience that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without your guidance. Thank you so much.
Well, that's so sweet to hear. And I think you might have found your way anyway, but I'm glad you're doing this work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Those are some kind words, especially coming from you. So I get to interview the GOAT, y'all. Here we go. I'm going to jump right on in. And as you know, we're going to have a lot of fun here today. But as we know, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a serious conversation. But we try and express and discuss it in a way so that everyone can really understand, get the gist of what DEI is all about. So 5 questions. And Myrtle, Dr. Bell gave me her top 5. And so we're going to jump right on in. How did you get into the DEI field? Tell us your journey.
Okay. So I often say that I've been doing this work all my life, which is 63 years. So I grew up in the Deep South, and I experienced and observed inequity and discrimination from a young age, and I was always questioning. When I was young and in school, and some of you may have done this too, we said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. And every time I got to the part where we said with liberty and justice for all, I wonder why this didn't apply to Black people, because I was young enough but smart enough to realize different stuff was going on with Black people. And when we sang the Star Spangled Banner, and this still happens to me today, I wondered why the land of the free was a place where Black people were enslaved and had been enslaved for hundreds of years prior to the Civil War, and then were not treated equitably afterwards. And so those questions and other experiences paved the way for the work that I do now. When I was in junior high, I was one of two Black kids in a class of 60. And one of our student teachers, we were on a laboratory school, and one of the student teachers invited the class to her wedding. And she read the invitation at the front of the class, and she pulled me aside to say that I could come to the wedding because it was in a church, but I couldn't come to the reception because it was at a country club, and Black people, or Negroes, as she called us, couldn't go in there.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that was part of my learning. And my mom, of course, went up to the school, and the principal called the student teacher in. And of course, she starts crying, and she didn't mean anything by it. And the principal said, we're not having this. And he implemented a policy. Anybody gets invited, everybody gets invited. And we see this now with children in elementary and school parties and such. And this was a teacher doing this kind of thing. And then when I went to college, before the summer before, in the old days, you would write letters to your email. And my name apparently, I mean, to your roommate, and my name apparently didn't clue my roommate that I was Black. So when I walked into the room, she was in there before me. She and her parents were in there, and she screamed loudly, "She's colored!" And she ran out to try to get a new roommate. And, seeing what happened then and seeing how the university handled it, and I saw that a university, when they stand up for their principles, it really does matter. And that's what they did. And they actually asked me, if they told her, "You can't move out. You move out, you move off campus." And at that time, nobody lived off campus, and it was totally uncool to be off campus. And then they asked me, "Will you room with this person after what she did?" And I said, "Sure, I've been through worse than that." But anyway, so my life set the stage for this work. And when I started the doctoral program at UTA in 1992, DEI work was just beginning. And I had a lot of questions about why things happened in organizations and what could be done about them. And my first major research article was based on relationships I had with my colleagues in a finance group. And we were a very diverse group. We were old, we were young. At that time when I started working there, I was 24, and there were people there who were in their mid 50s and early 60s. We were Black, we were white, we were male, female, married, single, yet we were very, very cohesive. And all the management research said diverse groups would be dysfunctional. They wouldn't be cohesive, they'd have
Right.
high turnover and low commitment. But in our group, we were neither of those things. We were the best of friends, and we spent time together at work and outside of work. And we actually still see each other to this day, 40 years later. We had lunch together. One person lives in Connecticut, another person lives in South Lake, some other person lives in California. We got together this fall. But so my doctoral advisor and I went round and round trying to figure out why this group still was cohesive and inconsistent with what the literature predicted, because they were diverse. And we came up with what we called surface level diversity. So we were diverse on the surface. We looked different. Our skin colors looked different. We were young and we were old, but our values and beliefs were similar. And we call that deep level diversity. And that research has really helped shape the diversity field. And that's, something I'm proud to be accomplished with. Well, I say proud with a grain of salt, but pleased to be pleased to be associated with. But we know that surface level diversity really does matter. And in some regards, that idea took a life of its own, and it overshadowed things like racism, like sexism, like the really evil, ugly stuff that still does happen in organizations. But nonetheless, that was the start of my work. And then I began teaching diversity in about 2000. And I was conscripted to do that when another professor left, which often happens to women and minorities. They're, conscripted to do something that they might not be so qualified to do related to diversity. And the initial class was a women in management class. And I used articles drawn from management and sociology because I had minored in sociology to teach that. So I had lots and lots of academic articles. And over time, that course morphed into the diversity class that I still teach today. So that's my journey.
Wow, that's so interesting. Man, we've known each other so long, and this is great that I have this opportunity to ask these questions to kind of hear that backstory, like the inside scoop. And for those who don't know, the paper that Dr. Bell's referencing, that paper is, oh my God, that paper is one of the most famous, one of the most read papers on diversity in the management literature in higher ed, deep level versus surface level diversity. I mean, people know that. The Harris Price Bell, 1998, it's stuck in my head. I know it, the
Hmm.
year, the citation, and everything. Yeah. So you talked about how you got here, your journey, getting into the field. So you have a ton of experience, a ton of experiences as well. What would you do differently? Like, what things would you do differently if you knew then what you know now?
Okay. So
Is that,
my initial
or you want me to come back to that question or?
no, no, you can,
Okay.
we can go with this one. That's fine. My initial thought when somebody asked me that is that I would run for the hills and choose a different line of work. Like I would do something else. That's my initial thought. But of course I wouldn't do that because this work really does matter.
Yeah.
It matters. And I really believe that life is too short to be doing work that doesn't matter. And I advise people, all the time, try to do work that matters because you're going to die. And what will you have done with your life? But what I would do differently if I knew then what I know now is I would try to figure out a way to keep this work from keeping me up at night, from turning my hair prematurely gray. I mean, it's not premature anymore, but it was premature, a while back when it started graying. And I'd keep this work from harming my health because I have a severe chronic disease, illness that I'm certain was triggered by diversity work. And
Mhm.
it's sarcoidosis, for those of you who don't know, SARCOID. And it's when the immune system attacks organs. And it's from being on high alert all the time. So I'm on high alert because I read diversity articles all the time and thinking about it all the time. And this cortisol is just going to town in my body. And, there's no research on people getting sarcoid because of diversity work, but I'm pretty sure that's why I have it. So I would try to keep it from harming health. And so what would I do? I don't know, but I would try to do that.
Okay. Well, that's some great advice for those who are interested in this work. It is not for the faint at heart at
It
all.
is not
Um,
for the faint of heart. Right.
yeah. Yeah,
Right.
that patience, courage, resilience, and so these are things to consider. So now you've heard it from one of the greatest of all times. What you need to do, take care of your health.
Yeah.
Health first.
Yeah. Don't let it
Um,
kill you. Don't let it kill you.
so I'm sure so because of your work and your experiences, there have been times you've become jaded or have negative thoughts, and because knowledge of the statistics, because I empathize with you. We're reading this every day. It's always something that's always on my mind. It's the research. We know the research. We know the statistics. We know the discriminatory incidents that have occurred. We know that we're more aware than
Mhm.
other people might even know. So what are some things that you've done? And I know you kind of answered. So one of the questions that you wanted me to ask was, do you ever become jaded or have negative thoughts? And so that question has been answered. What are some things that you do? And this is a surprise question, I guess. What do you do in order to help mitigate that or to cope with those negative thoughts?
Okay. So I am a woman of faith, and I
Yeah.
believe that's what keeps me going. And so I pray without ceasing. And there's scripture on that that says pray without ceasing. And that's
Mhm.
what I do. And I believe that that really helps me. I have all around me in my office all kinds of scriptures that, encourage me. And so that's the biggest thing that I do. Another thing that I do is I talk with others in the field. And so that helps provide some, you're not crazy. This really is happening, and take some time off. And recently, very recently, I've been trying to disengage from the work some. And so, but that takes a whole lot for me because the work is everywhere. It's everywhere. So I try to read like a book that's not an ableism book. I try to read like a cookbook, with pictures of food, and plant books that I can't twist into thinking this is racism,
Mhm.
this is homophobia, this is sexism, something
Right.
that just is just like for pleasure. And
Something more
then
neutral.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, neutral. And then I garden. I have lots of plants in my house. I would call myself a plant hoarder, quite frankly. But that's good for my spirit. I get to, enjoy them, and that helps.
Yeah, I know you have a beautiful magnolia tree, don't you? Or you once did
How
a
many
while
do I
ago?
have is the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, that's the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. So DEI research and promising practices change and evolve regularly. How do you stay current?
Well, I do a lot of reading. I read academic articles from different fields. So, of course, I read the management work, but I also read sociology and criminology and education, because there's diversity in every field. So, like in the
Mm.
education field, they might talk about the benefits of having Black, Latino, historically marginalized people as professors and teachers in K through 12. So I read articles from all kinds of different fields. I read quality research that's online, like Pew Research. Like they have really, really good articles and you can cite them. And I
Yes.
pay attention to the methodology of articles and try to make sure that it's good work. I read a lot of books. There's a lot of good books that people often are not aware of. A lot of times we focus on articles, but I just got my hands on a book called Disability in Media that's written by one of my colleagues at UTA, and I can't wait to read it. It's talking about the representations of people with disability in the media. I read other academic articles. There's a book that I have here called Evicted, Evicted, by Matthew Desmond, and it
Mm.
talks about the cost and how painful and the consequences of being evicted. And he looks at people from different backgrounds: white people, Black people, people with children, people without children, people taking care of elderly parents. And he takes us through what happens when one becomes evicted. And it's really, it's a sobering book. It's one of the ones that the kind of keep you up at night kind of book because the people are humanized, and
Right.
it's a really hard thing to think about, and it really helped me learn some things about social class and the experiences of very poor people. And he talked about, once you lose your home, you need a whole lot of money to get into another home. You think about first month's rent, last month's rent, and then the rent. So that's like
Right.
3 months of rent at one time, and you got evicted. Sometimes people's stuff gets taken when they get evicted, and so that's a really good book. So I read a lot of things to stay current. I also pay attention to what's happening in the news. And so like if people are getting sued for work and family discrimination, I sent myself an article the other day from a newspaper in Indianapolis. A lesbian woman who worked at a prominent Catholic school in town had been fired because she was gay, because she got married to a woman.
Mm.
And she sued and she lost. And then she appealed, and she appealed. She lost because of the stipulation that says religious organizations, such as religious schools, Catholic schools, can discriminate against people if they're gay or lesbian. And she said that should be only for the clergy. And I'm not a clergy member, I'm a counselor, and but she did lose, and she was in Indianapolis, but she was going to look at it a different route. So, that's an article I happened to be reading in the Indy Star, and I make note of it, and I, made a note. I'm going to go find out some more about what happened and what happened with that law. So that's how I try to stay current, and that's another thing that kind of, makes me sick because it's always on my mind. It's always on my mind. I'm always paying attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. It's like a double-edged sword,
Hmm.
it's just you need the information, but it also, yeah, it can be depressing sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and all encompassing, like so diversity, you think about race. So I'm a black, and so this is, you know, forefront in my mind. And
Right.
you think about police murders, and I'm not watching a black man get beaten to death or kneeled on to death on TV. I'm not going to watch that, but I know it, and it's all in the air. And then you think about sexual harassment, you think about trans people killing themselves. All this stuff is in my mind, and
Mhm.
it keeps me up at night, and I'm worried about it and that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough, and in our jobs, like you and I were talking before the show started about making an impact. And I think sometimes that's really, that kind of helps be continued because if there were no impact, I didn't see that little bit of progress, even though it's what, one step forward, three steps back or whatever.
Mhm.
If there wasn't any progress at all, yeah, it would be very difficult to do this work. Absolutely.
Right.
Mercy says, great writers from and content from other readers. That's amazing to know. Let's just give you some more feedback here. Mercy also says, glad to hear that you have scriptures all around you to build and help you overcome some of the
All
pressure.
around. All
Yeah.
around.
See, Liz Mendoza in the comments, she says that she has a job that's not even a fraction as important as this, and she invests too much time and loses sleep. That part really hits home to not let our jobs kill
Oh
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're dead, my sister said this one time and it really smacked me in the face. If you're dead, you are no good to anybody but the worms.
Mm,
Yeah.
man, that's real. That's real talk
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
And I think this is a real good one. Good information on being high alert that triggered the condition. Karen says that. So
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
Let's see. We have some questions here. So that's great. We have some questions coming in. We're going to ask if Micah, if you can save those questions that come into the chat so we can save those for later. We have one more question. Then we get to the main event, the top five, right? But here's the last question first. What is a project that you worked on or are currently working on that you're proud of and would like to share?
Okay. So I mentioned pride before, and I believe that pride goes before a fall. My mom always said that to me, and there's scripture, and I try not to be prideful, but I'm very grateful and thankful to have had the opportunity, and I count it as a blessing to be able to write my book, Diversity in Organization. So I mentioned that I was using articles to teach women in organizations, and then I started teaching diversity, so I started using articles to teach that. But a lack of a good textbook suggests to people that the topic is not a real topic, that the class is not legitimate. And so publishers would come by your office and say, what are you teaching? What kind of book would you need for this class? They're trying to, get you to adopt their books. And I would always say to different publishers, I need a diversity textbook. Do you have one? Do you have one? And they would say, no, we don't have one, but why don't you write it? But why don't you write it? And I would say, I can't write a textbook. What? No, what? But I began to feel in my spirit that it was my charge to do. And, when you get that feeling in your spirit, you better do it. I didn't want to be like Joan. And so I did. And so the book is now in the fourth edition. Those of you who are using it, please let me know if you see any errors, things that need changing. Please let me know. And I'm currently working on the fifth edition. And I know that a lot of books don't make it past the first edition. And so I'm really grateful to have had that experience and to continue to be able to think, I think affect the world. People I will never know have read this, and people I've gotten emails from people, from strangers, that say, of course I've gotten hate mail too, but some of the good ones that say, this affected my life. Thank you for writing this book. And that
Yeah.
really, really matters. And I'm grateful to have had the privilege of doing this.
Yeah, I love that book because, I like how it's organized too, how we're able to get insight into all the different identity groups who we encounter, interact with at work and in life on a daily basis. Because I think Mary Frances Winters talks about how to achieve empathy, which is what she believes is the key for inclusive leadership, is through experience, education, and exposure. Right? And she says, how can I have empathy for you if I don't even know you? And I remember the first time I read the textbook, and I was like, this is just unbelievable, because you're able to learn about all the different people in the world and what they're going through, and compared to what I'm going through as a Black man, and see the outcomes and the research associated with that all in one spot. It's just so. How long? When was the first edition? How long has the book been published?
The first edition showed up in 2006. So I finished it in 2005. And then there was another one in maybe 2011, 2017. Now this one, and now I'm doing another one.
Wow,
But
that's
I
a good
tell
run.
you,
I say that's a good run.
yeah,
Wow.
I think so. I think so. And it has improved from year to year. But I remember when I told you I felt conscripted, like you have to do this in my spirit. This is something for you to do. And I distinctly remember sitting down at my desk. I'd signed the contract and sitting down at my desk and saying, okay, Lord, you're going to have to help me because I don't know how to write a book. You're going to have to help me.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, okay, so what do people need to learn? What do they need to know? And so you say how it's organized. Well, they need to know about the history. The
Yeah.
history matters because the history affects where we are today. And I've had students say to me, I didn't believe this. I didn't believe this. And then I looked at the footnotes. So, like in the book, there's lots of footnotes, research, articles. Click on it, read it for yourself, and then click on some more when you get there. And he said, I didn't believe you. And it's actually worse than what you said.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true. Students tell me the same thing. I have feedback from students. They're like, I had no idea,
Had no idea. Yeah.
that all
Yeah.
this is going on, and we just walk through life and don't realize.
And don't realize. Yeah,
That's
and things
yeah.
like, I had, misperceptions and realities. We have
Mm,
so many misperceptions about each other. Where do we
yes.
get them from? From the media, from our parents, from our teachers. But here's the real deal. So like some of the facts are that Black women work outside the home at higher rates than other women. And people don't know this. If you listen to the media, you believe
Mhm.
that Black women are not working. You might believe that they're on welfare, when in actuality, they're more likely to be working than any set of women. You might believe that women with small children drop out of the workforce. Well, most women with small children are working because they need to buy diapers and they need to buy formula and they don't want to take a big hit to their career. And so, data, I believe data matters. So
Yeah.
so tell them things and show them data and point them to the data. And I think that really, really helps. So I built the book with the foundation of data. You asked me earlier about how do I stay current? I read articles and I read them and I read some more and I look at the government statistical sources, the Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics, because, we have a lot of misperceptions and
Yeah.
and we need data to help us.
Yeah, I'm glad that you dropped those websites, those sources for people too. Those are great sources to get your information from. You
Yeah.
can go and see what's the participation rate, the labor participation rate for different groups based on their race, based on their gender, based on even if they're foreign born versus domestic. I mean, there's so much information is out there. We collect this data,
Right.
and I think people don't realize that the media they just want advertising dollars. If it's a sound bite that sounds catchy, that can maybe shock and awe or can capture someone's attention. That's all they care about.
Mhm.
It's to the point it's crazy now. You'll have headlines that'll say one thing, then you read the article, and it totally is the opposite of what the
It's something
headline
else.
suggested. Yeah.
Right.
So
But somebody got paid when you click.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's all they care about. So top five. All right, everybody. That's what top five did Dr. Bell ask? She wanted us to ask her about her top five songs on her playlist and why. So I'm very interested, eager to learn what are your top five songs on your playlist and why is that song, each of them on your playlist?
Okay. So this is not in any order.
Okay.
So they're just in the top five. So the first one is Every Praise by Hezekiah Walker. It is fantastic.
Mm.
If you listen to God music, I don't want to call it gospel, I don't want to call it Christian. It's got a wonderful beat. It's hopeful. It is a jam. I mean, it is a dance around the house jam. And it's also got great music videos. So you can see different ones where he's playing this. And so it's fantastic. And
Latanya, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She says she loves that song.
it's fantastic, right? It really is, right? And I was listening to or watching Unsung, I think that's the TV show
Mhm.
about musicians who were unsung heroes or whatever. And I saw this guy and I'd never heard of him and I went and found it. I'm in love with that song. Number one, I've
Wow.
sent it to people. They love it too. So listen to it, everybody. The next one on my list is Love's Theme by Barry White. And it is wonderful. It's all music, it's an orchestra. And I grew up listening to Barry White. Many of you have not heard of Barry White, but he was a fantastic, no musical training, but he could write orchestras and direct orchestras. He was just phenomenally blessed. And I grew up listening to him at a time when speakers were 3 and 4 feet tall and they would shake the house. And I'm talking about a brick house and a 1-story brick house, not a 2-story house that would shake with a basement. No, shake the house. And he was a phenomenal musician. And I still listen to him now. My children who are 30 and 35 listen to him now because they grew up listening to him. So that's number two, Love's Theme. And a lot of Barry White stuff is really good. I also like Leaves, Leaves by Miguel. And some of you all may know that. And he's talking about California, which is my favorite place to be. And I've been to a lot of good places, but I love California, Southern Cal.
Me too. Me too. I just
Me
wish it wasn't
too.
so expensive.
I
Otherwise,
know.
I'd be living
I know.
right now.
I know. So would I. So would I. Yeah, I just spent a week there in Laguna Beach. It's like paradise. And I was there in Laguna Beach in November. I was in San Diego in September. So I said, I can't afford it to live there, but I can visit there as much as I want to. But so I love this song about leaves. And he's talking about California, the leaves don't change. Now it's a sad song. It's a sad song, but he's talking about California. And it's got really beautiful beat and you can turn it up really, really loud. And it's wonderful. My next two are songs that I play for my diversity classes, and we call them our theme songs. And the first one is The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics. And it's talking about focusing on the living years. And like the first few lines, every generation blames the one before, all of their frustrations come beating on their door. I
Mm.
know I'm a prison of everything my father held so dear and all his hopes and fears. I wish I could have told him in the living years. So the father's dead. He didn't tell him. And, they talk about the arguments they had. And it's too late when you die to admit you don't see eye to eye. And so I love that song.
That's
And
deep. That's
it
deep.
is so deep. It is so deep. And I, you know, when I'm teaching in person, I play that and the students listen and think about it. And the next one is it's 100 years. The living years and the other one is 100 years. And this one is Five for Fighting. And this one really has a fantastic video too. And I encourage you to listen to it. And I'd show it to my students at the beginning of the class and ask what do you see? And it starts with, 15, I'm 15 for a minute, I'm 33 for a minute, I'm 45 for a minute, and every day's a new day. And, when I'm 15, there's still time for you. You got plenty of time. And then it goes to you're 99 for a minute. You're 99 for a minute. And then you realize, okay, so you're at your 100 years. And, the chorus is when you've only got 100 years to live, if you only got 100 years to live. But if you think about it, do you think you're going to get 100 years? You're probably not going to get 100 years. And what are you going to do with the years you get? What are you going to do with the years you get? And, the video is really phenomenal. So this guy's playing the piano, and the I guess the protagonist is walking, and he's probably 40 at that point, and he walks to the end, and he gets to this old man with the white hair, and they meet at the end of the video, because your time, even if you get 100 years, that's not but 100 years. And so
Wow.
that's my playlist. Yeah, and I encourage you to put them on your iPod. Yeah, I still have an iPod. Put it on your phone and listen to them. Yeah, because
That's
they're
okay.
they're thought provoking. And then I feel like all of my songs, I think, thought provoking. Every Praise in 100 Years and Love's Theme, Leaves.
Yeah, that's a deep playlist. I think that's the most thought-provoking playlist anyone has ever shared.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, because usually, someone has a song they like to they listen to upbeat and stuff, and someone has like people have shared. Of course, religion is an important part of everyone's life, and she might share some church songs. But I want to check this out. And Barry White, I did not know that he was untrained.
Yep.
Wow, that is
Yep.
amazing. And his
Amazing.
voice, my mother loved Barry White too
Oh
because
my
of his
goodness.
voice. My wife too, she loves Barry White because of his
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
He'd be
Yeah.
like, "Take good care of you. What a man's supposed to do."
Yeah. Yes. 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 And when I was growing up, Barry White was construed as nasty. Like he
Yeah,
was nasty.
yeah, that's right.
And the stuff that Barry would say is like P or not even PG. It's rated
Right,
G
it's
now.
G,
It's rated
rated
G
G
now,
now.
right?
Right,
So
right.
my daughter put some stuff on. I told her to make me some playlists, and she put some on my phone. And I'm going through and deleting the stuff. Like, I don't want this on my phone. What is?
And the first I know, right? Nas, yeah, my son Nas, he's always putting me up on stuff too. And I'm like, oh my God, it's on a whole nother level compared to I thought our generation was the one who quote unquote kind of,
Went left.
messed up the
Yeah.
music
This
industry.
one's
But
worse.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Barry was really clean and pure in hindsight.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have some questions I see in the chat. And also, if anybody else has questions that you would like to ask, you can just add those to the chat. And if we have time, we will get to them. So I'm going to back up a bit. And where's the first question at? So we have it from Jayla Jackson. This is an interesting question, too. Can you ask if the term blacks is appropriate? It's in our textbook, but I know a lot of Black people who are offended by that term. That's an interesting question because different people, have different preferences. Me personally, I prefer the term blacks over African American. I know some people who prefer it the other way around. So the question is it appropriate? And, however else you want to answer that question, or maybe why you chose to use that term or what have you.
Okay. That is a good question, Jayla. And so whether it's appropriate, I can't say whether it's appropriate or not, but I chose to use it because, well, she asked about blacks, Blacks,
Mhm.
because, and I've talked with one of my collaborators, blacks, browns, those are colors. And so he never says blacks. He likes African American, African Americans. But I say black because the research shows that most black people prefer black. But what I've begun doing, and there are generations. So what I've begun doing at the beginning when I first wrote it, I said I'm using these interchangeably. And so I will say black and I'll say African American, but for every African American, I probably have 5 to 10 blacks because that's just my preference and it's easier and that's what I like. But there are people who really don't like that term and really prefer African Americans. Blacks is more comprehensive. So there are Black people who are Black from Africa, who are Black from South America, who are Black from Haiti, and don't consider themselves American at all. And so I think that is another reason for using the term Black. But the biggest thing I would say is, and I try to do this myself, is to respect what people like. And so if you're in a conversation with someone and they express that they prefer African American, then remember that and use that with them, even if you prefer yourself, which I do, to call myself Black. I grew up in the say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud generation. And so that's why I continue to use it. But definitely people are rubbed the wrong way by that. Many are.
Mm. Thank you for that. And that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Sarah Salam says, who publishes? Oh, I can answer this question. Who publishes the diversity textbook? That is Cengage, right? Is that right? Cengage publishes it.
Hmm.
Where can we find it, Sarah? If you just Google diversity in organizations, Cengage, spelled Cengage, you'll find
Hmm.
it real quickly.
Hmm.
Carly asks, do you have any book recommendations for organizations looking to implement a DEI framework? Hmm, good question. Now I'll do a selfish. Well, and say me and my colleagues. Oh, Myrtle, Monica Gavino and Dr. Gavino, and I don't know if you know Dio Akinlade.
Hmm.
We're actually writing a book now, a framework that we created called Imagine. We just got Routledge, Taylor Francis, an editor, reached out to us, wants us to submit a book proposal. But that's not out yet, Carly. But that is a framework. That is a DEI framework book to kind of connect the dots. Step one, step two. Type it's going to be a workbook. But Dr. Bell, you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I don't know an answer to that question for DEI framework. I, my mind thinks like practical, like they need to know about this data, about this is what happens and that's what happens in the other. But I do think like there's some articles that talk about frameworks. So there's Robin Ely and David Thomas. Really, really good book, Ely and Thomas. Let me see, I'll give you that article citation.
Oh,
And they did really good work early on that. And so it's not a book, but it's an article. Let me just see. It's worth looking at. Let's see.
Ilya Thomas. Is
Uh-huh.
that is
You
that
know that.
the perspective one? Is that the three perspectives, maybe?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, that
The
is a
one.
good one. It's
Yeah,
kind of you can
that's a
have a
really good one.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
really good one. And I can't find it right now. I'm looking at their 2020 Harvard Business Review article, but that's not the original one that I'm thinking about. But I will find that article and send that to you to send to Carly. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. Sure
Elian
will. Thank
Thomas.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, and also, you know what? I just thought about surprisingly, when we were kind of researching what our book would look like, surprisingly,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's diversity for dummies or DEI
Mm,
for idiots or whatever. Surprisingly,
mm.
that book is pretty good.
It's a
It's
pretty good
yeah,
book.
it's pretty comprehensive, and it does kind of have a lot of elements where it shares kind of the what to do, how to implement it inside of an organization. Right. So there's theory, but there's also a lot of practice in that too.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah, I
That's
forgot all
good to
about that
hear.
book. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Okay, LaShawn has a question. This is a very interesting question. Do you think Carly said thank you, by the way. Do you think that some teachers should have a disclaimer on some of the videos they show? I had a class that showed Amistad and I watched it and was crying. I never saw the movie and it was very emotional.
Most likely. Most likely they should. I know that when something's triggering in my classes, I will tell them this involves this, and do not watch this if this will upset you. So I am one who knows that stuff can make you sick and upset and crying. I used to watch, and if you haven't watched it, it's worth watching it. I used to play this in my class, and I watched it with my grown children over the holidays, Philadelphia. Philadelphia, the movie with Tom Hanks and Denzel
Denzel
Washington.
Washington. Yeah,
It
I
is a
remember that movie.
fantastic
Yeah,
movie. It's
that
a
was a good movie.
fantastic movie, but it is triggering and it
Yeah,
will like break your heart. But it's a really, really good movie and it's an eye-opening movie and it's worth watching if you can stomach it. But I certainly tell my students, don't watch this if this is going to upset you. You can leave, or if it's an online class, I will tell them, don't watch it. And so, like I think I mentioned to you that I haven't watched the George Floyd murder. I haven't watched the Tyree Nichols murder. I'm not going to watch that. But there's some things that you can learn from. I haven't watched Amistad either. And so I'm sorry that happened to you, LaShawn. I'm really sorry that happened to you. And yes, I think people need to attend to what they show in classes.
yeah, I agree. I agree. And yeah, I've had to pull back from a lot of stuff too because it just, yeah, we call it, Ty and I call it our news fast. And
Mhm,
what's so crazy is
mhm,
I will look up. Seems like every time I decide, okay, I'm going to listen to some news, like I need to take a break. And it's like I return to a world I don't even recognize because it's something that's even more crazy than what happened before. Or
mm,
just when you think that things might be coming back to some sort of sense of normalcy, then yet again, there's another,
yeah,
unarmed Black person being beaten or killed
right, or
but
a mass shooting.
yeah,
Yeah,
or mass shooting. It's,
mhm,
so.
yeah.
So, I'm trying to find, are there any other questions on the chat? And also at this point, now that since I don't think it's too many of us, if you have a question that you want to ask personally, you feel free to unmute your mic. First, unmute your video, show your video, so that we know that you're about to ask a question, and then unmute your mic. Otherwise, everyone might unmute their mic at the same time, right? So, are there any more questions from the audience? Okay, looks like a job well done. I have a question though. I'm curious to know that what is your so you talked about when writing the book, your first thought was what do people need to know? Okay. And so the history and I get that, but I'm just curious to know what because to me it's so innovative and I've yet to see another book that really has done this, that really chapter by chapter we're able to take a deep dive into the personal experience of someone else, another identity group that most of us, let's be honest, be frank, many oftentimes we live in a bubble around most people, you know, probably not you or I, but most people live in a bubble where they're always around people who are just like themselves. And so, like, was there any pushback from that? Or did you just come up with that? I mean, what is it that because I always talk to people about diversity, and one of the main issues is that people don't take time to step outside of their comfort zone. People don't take time to learn about other people. And for me, that book was so innovative because it's the first book that actually did that. Was like, hey, you need to know about these other people. And now that kind of brings down the barrier for someone to be open to listen to what's going on in the lives of other people, to be open to understand why diversity, why equity, why sense of belonging matters. And
Yeah,
so I'm just curious, did you just think of it or is it something that just kind of just ponder
I
over it? I know you prayed on it.
yeah,
I
I
know
did,
that.
and it just came to me. It really just came to me, like, you need to talk about these different groups, and you need to talk about their history, and help people to understand their common humanity. And so, I told you I've been doing this work all my life, but my mom was a professor, and she would bring home students. And our home was a home away from home for other students. And so,
Wow.
like, we had Malaysian students to come and stay at our house. We had a South American student from Guyana, South America, who is still very close to us right now. I saw him in November at my mom's services. And so, from early on, I knew a whole bunch of people who weren't Black Americans. We had teacher corps people who stayed at our house, and there was this one Black guy and a white guy who were roommates, Phil and Clancy. And they would stay at our house. And so I got to know white people really well back then. And Phil was a principal actually in Washington, and he died prematurely. And one of the things that they asked him, who affected your life? Who are the three people who affected your life? And he said his mom, and one was a priest of some sort, I can't remember. And the other was my mom. And he, was a teacher corps member, and he got to know us. We got to know a lot of people who were different from us. My mom taught in HBCU. She had a Chinese who was a visiting scholar, a Chinese professor. And this is a very interesting story. My mom was really everybody's friend. And so the daughter would come and visit at our house all the time. And one day she said, I can come to your house, but you can't come to my house. She lived in a white neighborhood. And so that was the end of those visits. You can't come to our house either. But her mom, who was a professor, told the department chair, every time you say Chinaman, that's like if I call you the N word. And so the department chair didn't know that Chinaman was a racial slur. But so this woman told her that. My mom came home and told me that. So I've been learning for a long time. Okay, so I didn't know there was a slur. You see that on Bonanza. Those of you who are listening probably don't know Bonanza. It was I wouldn't even call it a cowboy show. I don't know what it was, but there was Hop Sing in there, and the guy referred to him all the time in this racial slur, which we didn't know was a racial slur. But if you interact with folks who are different from you and listen to them, then you learn a whole lot. And so I guess my whole background was getting to know people who were different. And then I realized that once you get to know people, then you can see them as a human and you can understand some of their stories. You can understand how offensive it is to be asked, where are you from? People do that all the time. Where are you really from? And those are microaggressions. Well, we got a term for it now, but I learned a long time ago that that's offensive to ask somebody unless there's a reason for it. Is there a real reason for it? Are you in an international meeting? Okay, then ask people where they're from, but don't just see somebody and assume they're not American.
Right.
Oh yeah, so that's how I did
Wow.
it. I think it just came.
You were blowing my mind right now. It's like we known each other so long and it's connecting all the dots. It makes so much sense. Man, so you was you were blessed. I mean, I'm just saying the fact that to be at a young age around different people other than yourself. I grew up in the South Side of Chicago. All I saw, I mean, black people my entire life until I think I signed up for the Chicago Children's Choir. So I had to take a bus into Hyde Park, which is by the University of Chicago campus. But other than that, I mean, that was my everyday. And so for me to have thoughts about diversity, my thoughts about diversity were shaped differently, in this kind of this bubble of us versus them and why. But I could see how now, like the diversity of research, one of the biggest papers, right? How deep level diversity becomes more important and more impactful than surface level diversity over time, and how this all comes from growing up around so many different types of people. You were able at a young age, able to value and appreciate the differences of people because you were around it.
Yeah, yeah,
Man, that is
that's true.
so amazing, and
That's
that's
true.
beautiful, and then, then it would had to be a gift to us to be able to learn this as well, because it took me a long time too, even with the DEI hat, even when you're treated a certain way, it takes a while to then 'cause you have this internalized racism, you have self-hate, then you learn to love yourself, and then you have to love others, but then it's hard to love others who are different from you when you're treated by them in a certain way. I remember growing up different parts of the city, Chicago, my parents would say, "You can't go over there." And of course, you get older, you become hard-headed, you're like, "I'm going over there." And then somebody pulled up in the car, called me the N-word, us with our friends.
Mhm.
Of course, we're like, "Who you talking to?" Blah, blah, blah. I'm young Southside Chicago acting all. They pulled out a gun on us,
I was about to
a truck,
say,
yeah, a truck full
and
of
you
white.
lived to tell it. Wow, you
Yeah.
lived
So
to
of course
tell.
we were quiet. They said, "What did you say?" We're like, "Nothing." They pulled.
Wow,
Man, this
wow.
is so. And that's just one. It's had an incident where
Mm,
I was in a neighborhood, and I shouldn't have even taken the invitation. So my senior year in high school, I had to go to I was at a Catholic school, but it was predominantly white. And my biology partner said, "Hey, why don't you come play basketball with me?" The police came in the neighborhood and told me to leave the neighborhood. I'm not supposed to be there. Should have known better, right? Well, not I should have known better. I should have known that was going to happen, but being naive. And so my experiences, I never had that opportunity to really get to know other people. And that's a blessing. And now it's been able to become this research that you have. So
But
it's
I
always
will tell
to
you,
learn that.
Jason, it
Wow.
was no cakewalk. We had
Yeah.
those experiences with people and got to know their common humanity, but I had a whole bunch of those bad experiences too, a whole
Yeah.
bunch of them, really a whole bunch of them. I remember when I was a little girl, my uncle came to visit and he had a Triumph. It's a TR7, it's a little sports car.
Mhm.
And he just disappeared one day and he was gone for 3 days and we didn't know where he was. And we're looking for him. You know, we didn't know where he was. The cops had stopped him and accused him of speeding. And, he wasn't speeding. He is a little white convertible. And they arrested him. They beat him in jail. They flushed his head in the toilet. 3 days later, they gave him his one phone call. Well, he was an attorney working for the Department of Justice in DC. So he called his boss. And so, of course, they got in trouble, but, this is like in the
Wow.
64, 65, and I was a little kid.
Mm.
And so I realized then you're not safe. You're not safe around the
Right.
police. This is a really bad place. So I had all these kind of bad experiences that you had sitting in the top of the movie theater because they were segregated
Yeah. Wow.
at the bad experiences while also having the experiences where the white people were staying at my house and,
Mm.
there for the weekend, where the Malaysian people, the Chinese people, the Ghanaian people, the Guyanan people were at my house. So I had both of them. And then I guess that's how you realize that
Mm.
individuals behave differently and they're really bad police officers who do really bad things, but they're not all of them. But still you stay away from, like, to me,
Right.
like, stay away from 'em, never call the police because of this experience that when I had when I was a child.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
interesting. It's kind of like balance. When there's balance,
Mm.
it kind of adds a different perspective.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
interesting.
And recognize that people are individuals and there's a whole bunch of bad
Right.
individuals. There's a whole bunch of not so bad individuals. There are people who are behave badly because they're ignorant and they do not know. There are people who behave badly because they want to behave badly and they do know. Like there are people who are gloating and laughing over Tyree Nichols' murder. There are people who are heartbroken over the murder. There are white people who are heartbroken and,
Mhm.
you know, trying to do something. And so if we could see people as individuals, that's a
Yes.
really good thing.
Yes. That's the key right there. Then we can have some real candid conversations about about, the, all the different forms of discrimination, all the isms here in America.
And listen to each other. We can
Yeah.
listen to each other and believe what the marginalized groups are telling you. You know,
Right.
listen and don't say, "Oh, I don't think that he meant that. I don't think she did." Listen to them and listen to how they feel. That matters a whole lot.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bell, for joining us here on Top 5 Media. This was great. Pretty sure the audience enjoyed it. We had some great questions. I learned so much. As I always do, but I'm like, man, I'm learning even more. Even still, the learning always continues.
Yep, it does.
Um,
That's one of the fun things about this field, right?
yeah,
Always can learn something.
so true, so true.
So I
Uh,
enjoyed it too. Thank you.
yeah, and to our audience, thank you all. We'll give you more details later on about when we launch the podcast. And I will keep you posted. Any questions that you have that maybe it was one question left we didn't have time for, send me that question and I will forward it to Dr. Bell. But definitely want to honor and respect her time. And have a good night, everybody. Enjoy your day, enjoy your night. Peace out, Dr. J.